In this video, we're going to go over graph terminology. So, a graph is a mathematical structure for representing relationships between nodes and edges. So, the nodes are the individual circles that are represented on any graph, and the edges are the lines in between them. Some graphs are what we call directed. Directed graphs mean that the path is from one node to the other, but not necessarily both ways. So you'll notice that graphs that are directed have an arrow between them, meaning you can go from the orange smiley face to the yellow smiley face, but there isn't a direct edge the opposite from yellow to orange. Graphs can also be called undirected, which means that connections between the two can go either way. So when you see the line between can and cat, that line means that you can go from can to cat or from cat to can. There's also this idea of a connected graph. So a connected graph is a graph where all nodes are connected to one another in some way. So you can get from one node to the other via some path. This is an example of a graph that's not connected because you have an island where there is no way to connect from that part of the graph to the rest of the graph. And then there is also this idea of a cycle in a graph. And a cycle in a graph is where you can basically revisit nodes on one portion of the graph because the connections are connected to each other in a repetitive way. So cycles aren't just an unusual aspect of a graph. Graphs often have lots and lots of cycles. So it's something that you have to really be aware of when you're working with graphs. So couple of things to just summarize. You have nodes and edges. There's other words for these. Vertices and arcs. We'll be using them interchangeably. They are both used and both appropriate to use. We have directed graphs, which are graphs that have direction associated with their edges. And so with a directed graph, you can have nodes that are connected in both directions, but there would need to be two separate edges. One that goes from this node to this node, and then another one that goes the other way. So you could see it drawn with two different edges, or you could also see it drawn with just two arrows on either side. And then we have undirected graphs, which just are bidirectional by their nature. We have this idea of a connected graph, which is a graph that all the nodes are connected to one another by at least one path, and then a cycle in a graph. So that's all the terminology we're going to go over in this video, and the main terminology that you're going to need to be aware of as you're working with graphs. Thanks.